Our journey begins. It is day 85, August 24, 2024. And I am here in my studio. As you can see, I'm doing the um, sort of seated on the floor position with the lighting. Um, and I'm just trying to get it mostly set up. I've been trying to think through actually starting to do some of the narrative sort of episodes and just being able to sit down and just record things and make them sound or um, record them appropriately. But then you get all of these thoughts of I wanted it to be perfectly laid out. And now there's like this time crunch, and I'm just like trying to get it done more so than trying to get it done perfectly. And I guess sometimes that's what you have to do. Now, I have been putting a lot of prep into the various aspects, so it's not like it's completely to the point where I would just be making things up. Like, I know exactly what I want to talk about, so it's just about actually talking about that. So today, I wanted for my um, this sort of check in, I wanted to actually do a practice recording of the first six approximate narratives and just sort of start by talking through things, and then I'll try to edit this um, appropriately and then make sure that there's any adjustments that I need to make. So let's start with chapter one. And chapter one is going to be called something around the lines of um, we have to make sure that we're being open minded. That's sort of the baseline for anything. It doesn't matter what idea. I would be sitting here, hopefully not too awkwardly, but sitting here talking about. Um, Before you give any idea, the person that you're talking to has to be able to have an open mind in order to even potentially, I guess you could still hear the idea, but you wouldn't be open to it. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is you have to start out with, hey, are you aware that you have cognitive biases of many different types that and now I sound like someone saying something to someone else, like, you this, you that. So we all have cognitive biases, and I have them and whatnot. And so sort of starting out with that. So the basic premise is that we really cannot know that anything. Like there's not much that we can know for certain. In fact, there's not really anything we can know for certain. This could be an entire simulation that an AI created to let humans work out and just like see what humans would do and sort of made a little bubble around this little universe that we think is so massive, but maybe just a little running in the background of some AI somewhere. Now, I don't know exactly if that's the case, but I'm just saying that that's the point, and that could be the case, and we would have no idea because we're not at the point where we have a fundamentally bedrock understanding of the world. And the other part of this first narrative is that a lot of people live life based on their set of values, their belief systems. And I wanted to kind of show that it's important to have the right set of belief systems. And I guess it's kind of funny, but because in my case, I want to not have any belief systems other than, I guess, believing that you should not believe anything to be 100% for certain. Because I guess everything is ultimately some sort of belief system. Because so I would potentially tell some sort of story about how a person could go through life thinking that they are doing the right thing. They could be done with life, they move on, and maybe they go to some afterlife that's great or not great or doesn't exist at all. And but the results that would have happened because of them on Earth, in the world, could be much better or worse depending on what belief system they happen to have, which is why I think it's important that we have a decent belief system based in truth rather than just based in what we want to believe, what we grew up believing, stuff like that. And I have like a little example story of myself sort of, or like a potential version of myself in the future that becomes very well to do, has all of the like if I only cared about myself and what I wanted to become, sort of going down that stretch and sort of taking advantage of everyone else, like everyone else that does think like that do, does. And so, um, and then the story would go that I run into someone who I'm like, they're like talking about this stuff as though they want to help other people or that they have more things to think about than just themselves. And then, but I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't work. Like that version of myself would have said that, oh, of course that doesn't really work. People have tried that. Like, obviously you can't actually make the world a better place. And, but then that person would have died and then, they would have died because of the business or the companies that that version of myself would have created. Um, And so meanwhile, I would have thought, "Oh, like, my businesses are fine, like, they help people," or something like that. And, and that's the storyline that so many businesses do tell themselves, that they're helping people, that they're meeting a cause, when if you looked at the whole thing holistically, like, you have to look at the employees that they're hiring, like, how are their lives? You have to look at, like, the planet and, like, how that's being affected by your company. And, like, it is your company doing a better or worse job than another company? Would it be better for everyone to just work for the other company? Or whatever, like, there's so many different things. A lot of times we do not look at things holistically. We just assume that we're right, and that's the way it is. And so then the story would have gone that he gets to this bedrock of, like, he just doesn't know what to do. He's just, like, totally washed out because he finally realizes that all the beliefs that he had, he actually should not just believe completely. Like he should be open-minded. And so that's an example of how the belief systems that we have can shape what we end up becoming and how we affect the world around us. And this is sort of obvious and it's a little hard to explain. Obviously that story, the way I explained it, is such an abbreviated form, it doesn't make sense. But that's the point. This isn't supposed to be perfect. This is just the practice round. But it seems to me that that's the right place to start. And I don't know how to do that totally correctly, but that is where we start. Narrative 2, or essentially chapter 2, would be going into. I do actually have this on here somewhere, I think. So I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but I just want to confirm, double check that I have the right outline. Once you're open-minded enough to begin to question things, analyze things, see things for what they really are, then you would, I think you would go into analyzing all the problems in reality. I think that is the next one, but it's not loading at the moment, unfortunately. Um, yeah, perception of reality, problems, possibilities, and confusion. So then once you're open-minded enough, then you take a real stock of what is actually going on. Like, to the best of your ability, what's going on. So then you look at all the problems that are going on. And I've made a video about this, and I have written this out. I've thought about this for a long time. Like, what are all the actual problems? And there are a lot, and there are a lot of people that are suffering, that are in pain, There are so many things that are not ideal that you wouldn't want like, if you were looking at it objectively, you wouldn't say, "Oh, yeah, that's just like, that's part of life or something." You would say, maybe that's part of life, but that's not ideal." Like, no one really wants that, and there are a lot of people who, when they're faced with this challenge or whatever, like, they really don't want it. Let's say that they get cancer and they die a young life or whatever because there's no cure for cancer currently. It's not like you would say, "Oh, like, that person should die of cancer." You'd say, "Well, that it wasn't of their volition." And then you get into, like, well, there's so much stuff going on, there's so many problems that and then you start evaluating, like, the state of reality, like, okay, why are some of these problems going on? Is it just someone's fault or the government's fault or something like that? And then you get a little bit confused with all of this stuff. Like, if you just spend and you get, like, this whole internet worth of just stuff going on in the world, and you're like, "Man, you have no idea what to do next." So, then I think you would be like, "Okay, there's all these problems." Yeah, it's still not opening. I wanna make sure that I have the right structure because hmm. Oh, here we go. Yep, through the problems, and then 3 would be, what would you do when you don't know? When there's all this stuff going on, there's all these different things pulling you in different directions. Okay, yep. So, this is sort of the crux. Number 3 is the crux, is like, okay, you're open-minded a little bit. Maybe some shocking event happened to you. Maybe you're always open-minded, but somehow or another, you're open-minded enough to really take stock of what's going on. Then you take stock of what's really going on. You have all these problems. You have all these various solutions people are coming up with. And you just don't know what to do. And you're like, well, like, maybe there's no purpose to reality because the universe is going to burn up eventually. Like, if God is really out there and clearly he is allowing all this to happen, then I cannot make a difference in whether he continues to let all this bad stuff happen or not. Like, he's ultimately going to control the the goodness of the universe, essentially. And you get all these things, and you're just like, but I want to live a happy life or something. And you're just like balancing all this stuff, and then it comes down to, what do you do in all of that? And to me, it's a choice, which I guess you could say, if you're making a choice about something, then your belief system of some kind, where you either say, okay, you don't know what's going on, you're just gonna kind of go through life. Well, whatever happens, happens, basically. You might do a couple good things here and there, you might do bad things here and there. Um, or you could say, you're gonna make the choice to go 100% out to try to make the world the best place possible. Which, I don't know, to me, that's pretty clear. It's like, you're just gonna do all that you can. You're just gonna go all out. Spend, like, the life that you have, maybe you're not sure why you're here. Maybe you don't know what the purpose to life is, or maybe you're worried that you're gonna do a worse job than someone else, or that you're gonna have to spend 50 years studying up so that you can have an opinion about something or something like that. Um, but the deal is that it you're that you either have the option to kinda, like, just whatever happens, happens, or to just go all out and say, "I'm gonna do all that I can. I'm gonna spend this life trying, like, actually literally trying to do everything that I can to make the world the best place possible." And then it comes down to, well, is it just the world the best place possible, or, like, my own life the best place possible? And I think that's where, if you take a stock, I if you were taking stock of all the problems in reality, you would realize that the problems in reality aren't just facing you. Like, when you look out at the world and you see problems, it shouldn't just be that you're looking at the problems that are affecting you. It's the problems altogether, all of the problems in the world. And so you would say, to make the world the best possible place. But I think along with that, you'll see, like, along with that comes becoming the best version of yourself and living the best life that you can live within that greater scheme of making the world the best place possible. Okay, so then you would get into story 4. And yeah, so story 2 would be you would just be like thinking about all the problems in reality. Story 3, you would have this great you would probably have like a climax moment where like you just don't know what to do. You have all this internal conflict and you finally are like, what do I do? And then this happened to me where I was like, well, there's this choice. All I have to do is say, okay, I'm just gonna try my absolute hardest to make the world the best possible place. And that's all you can. And then once you've made that, then it's like at least you're trying and like you're in that scheme of trying. And you're not constantly then telling your brain, because otherwise you're like telling your brain, oh, like that's never gonna happen. But like if you're actually doing all that you can and like planning things out and like working toward making the world the best possible place, like even if it doesn't work out or it gets halfway there, at least like you were making no compromises. I guess that's the point. It's like compromises versus just going all out. And I think that's what happens with a lot of religions and a lot of other aspects, is that people end up having to make compromises about this or that. And like when you get to that, you're just living a stale life because you're compromising on all this stuff. Okay, then story 4. Story 4 would be how to determine the best. Okay, so then like you have all these problems. You're like, okay, I am gonna make the best possible world, or I'm gonna help. I'm gonna try to do this. So then it comes down to okay, what is that? What goal are we actually reaching for? How do you actually define that whole thing? And then so then you're sort of figuring that out. And the storyline could be something like you're there, you're at this moment where you're wondering, and then you just start thinking through life. Okay, well, like what actual positive future would you want? If it is something where it's the best possible world and there are billions of people within the world, then you couldn't just have the best possible world for you. And so then you'd be like automatically you'd say, okay, well, that means that the best possible world should be like by definition should be something that everyone is reasonably in agreement with. So then you'd say, okay, the best possible version of the world is one that most people agree with, that logically stands on its feet. Like all of these narratives are supposed to be like a somewhat logical um, system of thinking. And then you would say, okay, well, um, so the best possible future would be one that people are thinking about, that everyone's agreement on. But then how do you define best? What does best mean in best possible future? Which you could say is kind of the same thing, depending on how you look at it. But you would have to define that. Like, is it best in what sense can you say it's best? And then with all of that, you start to think, well, like maybe right now we do this big study and we figure out, okay, this is the best possible future. But then in a year we get new knowledge and that wasn't actually the best possible future. But then you're like, well, now we have to stick with this thing and the belief systems are static. So that's where I think a major part of chapter 4 is realizing that the future that we're going to be going for is one, like the goal is going to be able to be constantly aligned. It's always pointing in the right direction. The direction of the railroad tracks are always aligning themselves to the right spot, to actually get to the destination that you actually want to go to. Um, so it's something where it's constantly evolving with new information, with everything else. I think that's the way it has to be. I think that's what a lot of religious institutions and political institutions and everything else, that's part of the issue that they have now, is that someone decided something, and then, well, does that actually make sense? Like, is that something that just people decided back when, but like doesn't actually make sense now? Like, you should at any point be able to know if something is the right thing to do or not. And that like I understand in general, like sometimes you can go in and out of like intelligence, like maybe late at night isn't the best time to decide when the right thing to do is. whereas in the morning, you know that you're more aware, and so you're more likely to count that as a higher state of, yeah, this is the actual future that we want. So that's chapter 4, which would be constantly aligning toward what is by definition actually the best possible future. Then you would go into chapter 5, which would be, so what really needs to happen to get to that best possible future? And chapter 5 would also be a little bit of thinking about, okay, what, like, if we were to just say, okay, I'm just going to think of the best possible future, what are some ideas out there? So, starting with what would actually need to happen, like, you can start with a couple basic things. Like, um, a lot of times when people are talking about history, they're like, well, we need to study history because history repeats itself. And history repeats itself because of human nature, basically. And then if you ask anyone anything about, okay, like, can humanity, um, and or can there one day be peace among humanity? And and the answer to that is probably no, because of human nature. Like, the bedrock for why people say no against everything is pretty much human nature, and which seems to be sort of static for a big portion. So it seems like in chapter 5, we'd want to talk about what is, or like, potentially we would want to evolve human nature a little bit. Now, does that mean that we're going to replace our brains with a silicon brain that thinks, um, that has like built in morals or something? I don't think so. I think there are ways to simply mature, evolve humanity's consciousness and nature a little bit. Because if you look at people that do good things that like most people agree are good things and people that do bad things, it's probably because of their past experiences, like the things that happen to them, and they're just expressing their nature. And whether good or bad. And so I think if we can change the environment and the things that are going on in the world such that human nature is, so that most people have a higher state of consciousness and a human nature that is actually helps them to achieve the better things. I think that's going to be a staple of this. And I don't really have a story off the top of my head for how that would go. So then what best possible future could we imagine? And so like basically we're either going to trend toward dystopia or utopia. Um like at any given point you're trending in both directions or mostly in one direction. Like there's a percentage of like which direction you're headed toward either dystopia or utopia. And um let me see. So chapter 5, we're talking about heading. So then you would think, okay, like what? So if dystopia is sort of what we can imagine with all of the bad things in the world, just like getting worse, well, then utopia would likely be whatever at any given moment. So utopia is that definition of what is the best possible future. That is the same thing. So at any given moment, you're thinking, okay, what is the best possible future? What does best mean in that scenario? And like a couple ideas would be something where there's not war all the time, something where people don't have to work, something where everyone just enjoys life, something where there's like endless possibilities of adventure and excitement. And there's like to explore and you're not in pain and you can live maybe as long as you want or whatever. There's sort of an unlimited abundance mindset. And I wouldn't say it's obviously hedonism. It wouldn't be the best possible future because there's been tons of philosophical thought processes where, yeah, if we think the best possible future is like getting drunk all the time and we create that world, but then obviously when everyone's drunk all the time, they're probably not actually going to long term be very happy. And, or like a bunch of people are going to be suffering, the people that are totally worse off from it or something like that. So, um, I wouldn't say the best possible, like, if you have in mind that the best possible future is like some hedonistic thing like that, I don't think that that would end up coming to the top of the list of what we're actually going for. And then we would go to narrative 6, which would be, okay, so we've thought through the problems, we've thought through a couple main ideas of like, so we might need to evolve human nature, um, we might need to, or like this is the best possible future that we're leaning towards. But yeah, like you would really need to figure out by chapter 5, okay, this is the direction that we know we want to go in for now, and that's it, totally evolving at all points. That we've created some sort of system where we're constantly reevaluating and always heading in the right direction. So you have that compass pointing in the right direction. Now, how do you start on that journey going in the right direction? And so basically, it's the idea of the movement. So the movement is just what I'm calling for now, like it's or it's just what I'm calling this idea of the force by which we achieve that best possible future, where best is defined in the most logically consistent way possible. And so I think it would be, and this is where chapter 6 is a bit of, well, we're not so, well, chapter 6 would be the movement where it is the force. So the force could be whatever it ends up having to be. Like that itself is evolving. Like if you have the compass pointed in the right direction, but then you get to a lake, you're going to need to be able to float across the water. If you get to a mountain, you're going to need to be able to climb the mountain. If you get to a jungle, you need to be able to traverse through the jungle, etc. If you get, you want to be able to like to like to be able to tunnel through rock. So like the tools that you'll need to actually reach the future that we're talking about can will likely change depending on where the compass is pointing and what stage of the journey you're at. And so I think by just saying, well, the force is sort of that is sort of the definition of whatever it is that you're doing. And so I have sort of a beginning idea of what the force or the movement would be, which would basically be everyone who's decided, who's like made that choice of like they want to actually make the world the best place possible. They're all working together in a coordinated fashion to make that happen. Like that's about all. It's a fairly simple-ish thing, but I think that's how you would has the most likely um, the most likely scenario of how you could actually bring about the best possible future. Like you could say, oh, like AI could bring about the best possible future, but really you need everyone to become the best version of themselves. But yeah, like I really don't know exactly what the correct or the ultimate thing will become, but yeah, you do basically get into this idea of the movement, of people working together, of coordination, of almost you could almost think of the force as like a business that like has this business goal, this like mission statement, and they just put all their effort into achieving the mission statement, and that's sort of what the movement would be. Everyone's working together with ultimate efficiency to achieve that best possible future. And I've thought through what the movement would look like, how you would coordinate that, but basically it would be some sort of coordination because there's even if you even if one person or one AI could achieve the best possible future, and then everyone could just be like, "Yeah, I wanna go live in that best possible future," and so everyone goes and lives with it. Like, really, to be safe, you would want everyone to have worked on it because then it's not just some one person who made a flaw somewhere and then it turns into this dystopia. So that's sort of the idea of the movement, and that's up to narrative 6. And, um, I obviously know what's going on because I've thought of these ideas for so long, but I don't know that I've actually explained them very well. But I feel like at least this was a practice session. At least I got the words out there and, got practice, and I will practice editing this and everything. So, I think we're all good to go. Alright, thank you so much. I will hopefully see you tomorrow, do a check-in. Hopefully, I can actually record this and get it going, and we'll go from there. So this should be I would like each chapter to take about 7 minutes. So if this was 6 chapters, this should take 42 minutes approximately, and it looks like we are at fortunately, I cannot see that far, 31 minutes. So we would have more time to detail things out more because I really did not explain what the movement is. I guess I could, do. Yeah. You would probably want to explain in detail what the movement actually would be starting out, but I'll think more about that. Alright, thank you so much.